I find his lack of balance disturbing.
It's all that data, bro. With SLT mega deals, he's got double data for the next 2 months.
Making headlines on First at 9. 50 days of turbulence. Former President Mahinda Rajapaksa steps down from premiership. Grave concerns. The Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna concerned over Tamil National Alliance orchestrating the parliament. What's next? The United National Party plots the future discourse.
Constitutionally, the next election will be the presidential election.
High time. The president calls for full comprehension of the scope of foreign forces.
Bike එකක් ගත්තොත් ෆෝන් එකක්. ඔව්, තෝරාගත් Yamaha බයික් මාදිලි සඳහා රුපියල් 40000ක් දක්වා වටිනා ස්මාර්ට්ෆෝන් එකක් නොමිලේ. ඉක්මන් කරන්න නොවැම්බර් 30 දක්වා පමණයි. කොන්දේසි සහිතයි. අමතන්න 0117 699 699 AMW තින් පමණයි.
A very good evening and welcome to First at 9, another Derana 24/7 Sri Lanka's news channel. I'm Theresa May. Now, following 50 days of turbulent days in office, former President Mahinda Rajapaksa stepped down from office this morning. Prior to signing the resignation, he addressed the parliamentarians of the governing party. In his address, the outgoing Prime Minister expressed grave concern over the influence of the Tamil National Alliance will have on the next government. He described the level of TNA's influence as having the remote control in Parliament.
The Supreme Court has delivered a judgment against the holding of the general election that had already been declared. The people have now been deprived of the general election that had already been declared. After the President dissolved Parliament on the 9th of November, the political parties opposed to the election petitioned courts and obtained a stay order on the dissolution, and with the cooperation of the UNP Speaker, they engaged in various activities to demonstrate that they had a majority in Parliament. But it was only on the 12th of December when a resolution was passed expressing confidence in Ranil Wickremesinghe and requesting that he be appointed Prime Minister that the people of the country were able to see the real state of things. A total of 117 MPs voted calling for Ranil Wickremesinghe to be appointed as Prime Minister. 14 of those votes belong to the TNA. Even though the TNA also requested that Ranil Wickremesinghe be appointed Prime Minister, on the same day, TNA parliamentarian Mahinda Rajapaksa made a special statement in Parliament on behalf of the TNA, saying that though they voted for Ranil Wickremesinghe to become the Prime Minister, they would not join the government and would remain in the opposition. So what has actually happened there is that the UNP, which has a minority of 103 seats, has been taken hostage by the TNA. If they do not adhere to the diktat of the TNA, the UNP minority can lose their parliamentary minority at any moment. The TNA now holds the remote control in Parliament. On the 12th of December, even before the Supreme Court judgment was delivered, Ranil Wickremesinghe spoke in Parliament about bringing a new constitution. Under the provisions of the draft constitution, this country will be divided into 9 semi-independent federal units. The new constitution will also abolish the executive presidency, which means that the presidential election that is due before the 9th of December in 2019 will not have to be held. The new constitution will also change the system of electing MPs to Parliament, which means that the parliamentary election due in 2020 can also be postponed, citing delimitation issues the same way the provincial council elections have been put off indefinitely. That is what they are now preparing for. After we formed a government on the 26th of October, the President declared a general election. When I was sworn in as Prime Minister on the 26th of October, that was to form an interim government that would last only for about 2 months until the conclusion of the general election, which was scheduled for the 5th of January in 2019. Since the general election can no longer be held, we cannot implement any of the measures we had planned to take to prevent this country from becoming another Greece. After the 26th of October, we were able to reduce the pressure on the people by bringing down price of fuel and some essential food items. We were also able to take certain measures to address the concerns of young professionals in the country over the Sri Lanka-Singapore Free Trade Agreement entered into by the previous government. We suspended the excessive taxes imposed by the previous government. We also managed to prevent several local industries from closing down. Furthermore, it has now become possible to end the totalitarianism system that prevailed in Parliament over the past 4 years, with partners of the government taking over the position of opposition leader and chief opposition whip and masquerading as the opposition while supporting the government. Since I have no intention of remaining as Prime Minister without a general election being held, and in order not to hamper the President in any way, I will resign from the position of Prime Minister and make way for the President to form a new government. The coming together of the joint opposition and the SLFP group that was in the government has now created a power bloc that commands around 54% of the vote base. Our main aim in the immediate future will be to hold the provincial council elections, which have already been delayed by more than 1 year and 3 months. There is no doubt at all that the people who stood by us since 2015 will continue to support us in the future as well. We will bring the forces opposed to the country down to their knees by organising the people.
After addressing the parliamentarians of the ruling party, former President Mahinda Rajapaksa then signed a letter of resignation, stepping down as the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka. Following the resignation, the outgoing Prime Minister returned his official vehicle to the Presidential Secretariat.
After holding office of Prime Minister for 50 days, former President Mahinda Rajapaksa today signed the letter of resignation at his official residence in the morning. Leaders of the United People's Freedom Alliance as well as parliamentarians were present at the occasion. After stepping down as the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka, former President Mahinda Rajapaksa sent his official vehicles to the Presidential Secretariat.
As the joint opposition, we're going to stay in the opposition stronger than ever and will speak up against the malignant measures taken by the government led by the UNP. We hope Mahinda Rajapaksa will be appointed leader of the opposition. We haven't taken such a decision as a party. The President has clarified the fact that a broader alliance will be established, which is nationalistic, patriotic and anti-UNP. Some from the SLFP came with a message of the President. That group and some members of our own party dragged Mahinda Rajapaksa down, who has a favourable public consensus to win any election with a majority. They created this conspiracy and made Mahinda Rajapaksa fall in trouble. We should get it because we have joined with the SLFP, so we should be the opposition. There is an issue somewhere if we are not afforded it.
The
remote control is now with the TNA and the country knows who influences the final decisions regarding this country. Ranil Wickremesinghe will take oath as Prime Minister tomorrow. Ravi Karunanayake will take oath as the Minister of Finance and Sumandiran will be the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Then the people of this country will be able to enjoy democracy. What we have to ask is, are you happy now?
Former President Mahinda Rajapaksa steps down from the premiership he held for 50 days in a backdrop where the Sri Lanka Freedom Party withdrew from the national government and President Maithripala Sirisena appointed him as the Prime Minister on the 26th October, issuing a Gazette notification removing incumbent Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe from office. Following the appointment of the new Prime Minister and the Cabinet, the President issued a Gazette notification dissolving the Parliament on the 9th of November. Then a group of political parties as well as civil organizations, however, filed fundamental rights petitions at the Supreme Court seeking nullification of the President's decision to dissolve the Parliament. The Court of Appeal then issued an interim order temporarily halting Mahinda Rajapaksa and his cabinet from functioning in their positions in response to a petition filed by 122 parliamentarians. On the 4th of December, attorneys representing Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa and his cabinet filed an appeal at the Supreme Court against the interim order which prohibited him and his cabinet from functioning. In this backdrop, the 7-member judge bench appointed to hear the fundamental rights petitions filed against the dissolution of Parliament delivered its verdict on Thursday, the 13th of December, stating that the decision of the President to dissolve Parliament is inconsistent with the Constitution. Then yesterday, a day after the historic ruling, the 3-member judge bench of the Supreme Court gave a ruling against lifting the interim order which suspended Mahinda Rajapaksa and his cabinet from functioning.
Meanwhile, Chairman of the Sri Lanka Podujana Perumuna, Professor G.L. Peiris, expresses his amazement over the birth of what he called the first Sri Lankan government to be orchestrated by the Tamil National Alliance. Addressing a media briefing at the party headquarters today, he also said that outgoing Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa would have garnered the support of the TNA had he consented to the conditions put forth by the TNA, but stressed that the former president rejected them as they were malignant to the country.
R. Sambandhan Mahinda Rajapaksa
R. Sambandhan called on Mahinda Rajapaksa at his official residence when I was there. Had Mahinda Rajapaksa agreed to conditions put forth by R. Sambandhan, he would have received the full support of the TNA. He refused the proposal without any hesitation as he realised it's a betrayal of the country. For the first time in Sri Lanka's political history, a government which is orchestrated by the Tamil National Alliance is going to be born, as the TNA has the full power to defeat that government in Parliament.
Ranil Wickremesinghe Gajamituru Anura Kumara Disana.
Anura Kumara Dissanayake, the good friend of Ranil Wickremesinghe, will lose his position of Chief Opposition Whip by the 18th. We will take seats as a powerful opposition with 101 parliamentarians, so they should give us positions of Opposition Leader and the Chief Opposition Whip. The crucial element in passing the 2019 budget will be the TNA. H.M. Fauzi and P.S. Gamage, who crossed over to the UNP, should be given ministerial portfolios. When those who do not receive portfolios begin wanting to cross over, Ranil Wickremesinghe will have no choice other than to seek the assistance from the Tamil National Alliance.
Leader of the Pivituru Hela Urume is insistent that the view they held on the dissolution of Parliament was wrong in light of the Supreme Court's verdict on the matter. Addressing a media briefing held in Colombo today, UPF MP Uddagamman said that the Supreme Court simply did not agree with their argument. Meanwhile, addressing the same media briefing, UPF parliamentarian S.V. Dissanayake said that as the opposition of the country, they are committed towards expediting the provincial council elections.
The President is now free to appoint a Prime Minister and a new government. We received information that a fine Minister of Finance is to be appointed. The SLPP and the SLFP are in the final stages of creating a broader coalition. We will immediately request a provincial council election. When we receive the role of the opposition in January, we will work towards handing the public their right to vote in a short period of time. Why is it possible for a judgment given by a 3-member panel to be changed by a 5-member panel? Because even a 3-member judge bench can get it wrong. It's a case of the Supreme Court not agreeing with our argument, but we do not necessarily think that we're wrong. The President gave a chance for other parties in association with the UNP to take up the position. But what can we do when none of them come forward?
Meanwhile, General Secretary of the UNP, Akla Viraj Karyavasam, announced that UNP leader Ranil Wickremesinghe will be sworn in as Prime Minister at the Presidential Secretariat tomorrow morning, making it Wickremesinghe's 5th term in the position. The parliamentarian was speaking at a media briefing at Temple Trees this morning.
There is no such agreement with the TNA. Its leaders have requested assistance to ensure that the rights of the Tamil people who have been victimized are upheld and be treated as citizens of Sri Lanka, as well as ensure development, all under a unitary state. We have not entered into any other condition. No one will give a two-thirds majority within Parliament to do wrong or threaten the identity and independence of this country. What was finally agreed to is that Ranil Wickremesinghe be sworn in as Prime Minister tomorrow and create a cabinet. We too want an election since we are currently at the peak, but an election that is constitutional. After Ranil Wickremesinghe is sworn in as Prime Minister, discussions will be held. A cabinet will be appointed by Tuesday the latest. No, it will be decided in Parliament after the formation of the government. It is the Speaker's duty. We do not expect to create a unity government with the SLFP, but we will be holding discussions with a group of SLFP MPs. We heard that there will be about 20 SLFP MPs participating. We will not accept them as a party, but we will open doors to individuals from the party to join us.
We have gone in front of a mirror and we have studiously identified our shortcomings. We have ensured that we will never ever make those mistakes ever again. And we have refocused, re-enthused ourselves to working on a short program, in the sense this will be a program for 1 year.
You say you're going to wait for another year without calling for an election?
Constitutionally, the next election will be the presidential election. And after 4.5 years of the parliament being in process, the parliament gets to decide through a two-thirds resolution, which has a two-thirds support of the members of parliament, I believe 150 out of 225. So we can dissolve ourselves. Otherwise, we'll have to wait till the expiration of 4.5 years when the president will have the freedom to dissolve, or you could always stay your full term.
That's the major expectation about you being the next candidate. Do you want to contest the
presidential candidacies will be determined at that time. Those are not country priorities.
Leader of the Janata Vimukti Peramuna parliamentarian Anurukumara Dissanayake insists that his party will defeat any efforts made by Ranil Wickremesinghe to increase the number of ministerial positions by way of a loophole in the 19th Amendment to the Constitution. He expressed these views at a public rally held in Colombo this evening.
The era of a national government has come to an end. The number of cabinet ministers will now have to be reduced from 48 to 30. The President and Mahinda Rajapaksa tried to find loopholes in the 19th Amendment to the Constitution. Starting from tomorrow, Ranil Wickremesinghe will also attempt to find loopholes in the Constitution. In fact, there is a loophole. In the 19th Amendment to the Constitution, it states that if all parties come together in Parliament, it will be recognised as a national government. The Constitution also allows one more party to join hands with the party with most number of parliamentarians in order for it to be recognised as a national government. The Muslim Congress is a party which has requested to join hands with the UNP. If both unite, it becomes a national government. If Ranil Wickremesinghe makes any attempts to increase the number of ministerial portfolios at Parliament by attempting to find loopholes in the Constitution, the JVP will defeat such an attempt.
President Maithripala Sirisena says it is high time that the country comprehend the full scope of foreign forces and their interferences and sculpt the future of the country. The head of state made this remark addressing the 93rd passing out ceremony of the Sri Lanka Military Academy in Diatalava this morning.
The 93rd passing out ceremony of the Sri Lanka Military Academy in Diatalava was held under the patronage of the Commander-in-Chief of the Sri Lanka Military, President Maithripala Sirisena. Accordingly, 234 cadets and officers who completed their training at the Military Academy of Diatalava passed out today. The new auditorium at the academy was also declared open by the President.
When we consider the current situation in our country, The security forces, citizens and state officials of the country have felt the need to comprehend new challenges. They include foreign interferences and threats. Attention of foreign nations are drawn towards exploiting Sri Lanka to enhance their own power. I am committed to fulfill every necessary task in order to strengthen the country's democracy and freedom. It is high time that we grasp the extent of foreign forces and act accordingly. Therefore, we should strengthen all our sectors.
Chairman of the Public Representations Committee on Constitutional Reform, Attorney-at-Law Lal Wijanayake invests the incoming Prime Minister with the responsibility to retrieving the country from the adverse effects stemming from the political crisis and bringing back normalcy. Addressing media, he also emphasized that the recent political impasse in the country made evident the necessity of a new constitution.
Our country was anyway engulfed in an economic crisis. Under such circumstances, we had to face a political crisis as well, worsening the situation. The incoming Prime Minister is faced with the great responsibility of reversing that situation. In order to do that, he should work bravely, intelligently and should garner the support of all. If not, there is no way out of this crisis. During this problem, we witnessed that the Constitution has bigger weaknesses. In March of 2015, we decided that we need to reform the Constitution and we received the nod of all 225 parliamentarians. It's been 3 years and the proceedings were slow. But now we realize that it is not something that we can postpone and that it is necessary to fast-track the proceedings and to prepare a constitution that suit our country as well as the people.
You are watching Sri Lanka's award-winning news channel, Derana 24/7.
Welcome back to the news. The central bank says that the month of November witnessed a slowdown in manufacturing activities. Issuing a media release yesterday, the CBS said that the PMI value in manufacturing sector, which stood at 54.3, decreased by 3.9 index points compared to October, owing to a slowdown in new orders and reproduction, especially manufacturing of textiles, apparels, leather and related activities. However, new order and production in the manufacturing of food and beverages activities has improved with the Christmas season demand. The CBS further noted that the services sector expanded at a slower pace this month, recording the lowest value since the survey began in 2015. The PMI value in the services sector stood at 52.6, which is a decrease of 2.9 index points compared to the month of October. The slowdown in the services sector was mainly due to the record low index value reported for expectations for activity. In its communique, the CBS further went on to highlight that a notable slowdown was also observed in new businesses and employment owing to the current political situation in the country and uncertainty on future policies. This, they say, have weighed on respondents' expectations for activity and the growth in new businesses. Wall Street's 3 major indexes tumbled yesterday, and the Dow confirmed a correction as weak data from China and Europe stoked fears of a global economic slowdown, while Johnson & Johnson shares were the biggest drag after reports said the company knew for decades that its baby powder contained asbestos. The S&P 600 small cap index confirmed it was in a bear market after closing 20.05% below its 31st of August peak, falling 16% on the day. Investors focused on global growth concerns and worried about U.S. growth after China reported weak monthly retail sales growth and industrial output numbers, as disappointing economic data was released from the Eurozone. Financial experts say weaknesses showing through in the Chinese economy in terms of the numbers that were reported as a result of the ongoing trade war was certainly a concern that bleeds into global growth concerns. The Dow Jones Industrial Average fell 496.87 points to 24,100.51, 10% below its 3rd of October closing high. Meanwhile, the S&P 500 lost 50.59 points to 2,599.95, 11.3% lower than its 20th of September record close, marking it the poorest performance for the benchmark since it fell more than 14% between May 2015 and January 2016. The Nasdaq, however, composite dropped 159.67 points to 6,910.67. British Work and Pension Secretary Amber Rudd says MPs across the political divide should abandon outrage and attempt to forge a consensus over Brexit. It comes after the PM's bid to make her Brexit deal more acceptable to MPs suffered a blow when EU leaders said it was not open for renegotiation. Meanwhile, ex-UKIP leader Nigel Farage has said that he thinks there might be another referendum.
European Union leaders made it clear to British Prime Minister Theresa May on Thursday that renegotiations on the Brexit agreement is a non-starter. The summit came on the heels of May surviving a no-confidence motion vote among her own Conservative MPs, many of whom bristled at May's move to defer a vote on her Brexit deal in Parliament. The major hurdle against parliamentary approval is the issue of the so-called backstop or the border on the island of Ireland, which has been a sticking point in the painful Britain-EU negotiations on how Britain will leave the regional bloc in March next year. At a media conference after the summit yesterday, European Council President Donald Tusk emphasized that the reopening of the withdrawal agreement is not an option.
We are ready to reconfirm our assurances and our goodwill and good faith when it comes to so-called backstop. I have no mandate to organize any further negotiations. We have to exclude any kind of reopening our negotiations on the withdrawal agreement.
Meanwhile, former UK IP leader and Brexiteer Nigel Farage called EU criticisms of British Prime Minister Theresa May appalling yesterday after allegations that the EU chief executive called May's Brexit demands nebulous the night before. May said European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker had clarified during an animated conversation yesterday that he had not called her nebulous.
In a midnight press conference, Jean-Claude Juncker uses a variety of terms of abuse about the British Prime Minister and her negotiating position and says that much of her approach has been nebulous. She confronted him. She said, "You called our approach nebulous." And Jean-Claude Juncker denied it. What we saw was appalling, and we've seen it from the very start. This organisation, this European Union, is not just a fundamentally undemocratic place, it's an anti-democratic place.
Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison has confirmed that his government will recognise West Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. He, however, said Australia's embassy would not move away from Tel Aviv until a peace settlement was achieved. He added Australia also recognised the aspirations of the Palestinians to a state with a capital in East Jerusalem.
Australia has formally recognised West Jerusalem as Israel's capital, reversing decades of Middle East policy. Israel regards all of the city as its capital, including the eastern sector, which is annexed after the 1967 Middle East War, and wants all embassies based there. US President Donald Trump outraged the Islamic world and stoked international concern by recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital in December and moving the US embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem in May.
Australia now recognises West Jerusalem, being the seat of the Knesset and many of the institutions of government, is the capital of Israel. West Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. And we look forward to moving our embassy to West Jerusalem when practical, in support of and after final status determination. Furthermore, recognising our commitment to a two-state solution, the Australian government has also resolved to acknowledge the aspirations of the Palestinian people for a future state with its capital in East Jerusalem.
You are watching Sri Lanka's premier news channel, Other Derana 24/7.
And that's it from Other Derana First at 9:04 tonight. But before we go, we are taking you to Snug Harbour Cultural Centre and Botanical Garden in Staten Island to see the first ever New York City Winter Lantern Festival. Spreading over 7 acres, the festival features cultural Chinese performances like line dancing, a martial arts show, and more than 3,000 handmade lanterns with 40 installations lit up with LED lights. Hope you enjoy these visuals and have a pleasant evening.
Bringing you the news and information 24 hours a day. This is Sri Lanka's premier news channel, Other Derana 24/7.